After its first month in theaters, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes has managed to hold strong at the box office despite several obstacles, but will that be enough to guarantee a sequel gets made? I'm here to give my thoughts. If you like what I do here and want to show your support, be sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things Apes. Enjoy the video. And welcome to Ape Nation, your number one source for all things Planet of the Apes on YouTube. My name is Josh, and today I wanted to do some catching up on the box office for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, where things will go from here, and what I think it means for the future of the franchise. First things first, let's just talk about how much the movie has made in general. So on a domestic level, the movie has taken in $150 million, and worldwide, the movie has now grossed $360 million. Both of them are going to continue to rise at least a little bit before the movie gets pulled from theaters in a few weeks. Before I wanted to talk about my overall analysis about how well or how not well the movie has done, I just want to talk about some of the achievements of this box office run so far. So first thing to note, the movie has beaten War for the Planet of the Apes at the domestic box office. That movie only made $146 million domestically, or a little under $147 million domestically. This movie has now hit 150. It's going to continue to climb. I believe it's probably going to end up in like the 160 to 165 range when all said and done. But it is an achievement that it's managed to beat War for the Planet of the Apes at the domestic box office, which I think shows that there is still a hunger, at least in the United States, for this franchise to continue. And then on top of that, the movie is also still in the top 5 after 4 weeks in theaters. A full month after the movie was released, it's still in the top 5. And I'd say there's even a chance it manages to stay in the top 5 next week as well, but we'll see. Another thing to note is that the movie is currently the 4th highest grossing film of 2024 and will likely remain in the top 10 for the rest of the year, barring any major surprises happen. I think it'll also end up being in the top 5 of the summer when the summer is officially over and wrapped. So again, those are just some other really significant achievements that I think everyone behind the scenes should be proud of and that the studio should be looking at in pretty positive light. And then one other thing is that the movie, throughout its entire run so far, it's managed to have pretty solid legs, and it's managed to have overall solid holds week to week with smaller percentage drops every single weekend. And it's also likely to continue to play throughout most, if not the rest of June, before finally getting pulled from theaters. So it probably has another, I'd say 2, if not 3 weekends left before it's officially gone. So you haven't seen the movie yet, you still have time. But yeah, it still has a little bit of time before it's officially completely gone from theaters. So those are some of the things that the studio should look at and be proud of. Everyone involved in the film should be proud of. And I think overall there is a lot to appreciate and celebrate about this movie's box office run thus far and where it's going to continue to go. But going on from that to an overall analysis, I just want to talk about my predictions for this film versus where they ended up landing when it comes to the box office. And then I'll get to what I think it actually is going to mean for the future of the franchise. But the first thing I wanted to talk about is China. Now, China, for those who don't know, up until I want to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, was one of the biggest factors in how a Hollywood blockbuster did at the box office. When you look at the Marvel movies, the Transformers movies, the Monsterverse movies, all these big, epic Hollywood blockbusters that make a lot of money, that make over $1 billion, they make that much money because of the Chinese audience and the Chinese market. Because up until a certain point, the Chinese audiences really enjoyed and really flocked to going to see big Hollywood productions. That was the case up until just a few years ago. However, now, and this is something that I did not take into account when I was making my initial predictions, which was going to be somewhere in the range of $500 and $550 million worldwide, and why I think it didn't hit that number is not just because, but one of the biggest reasons is because the Chinese movie-going audience does not flock to Hollywood blockbusters today the way they did 5-6 years ago and 10-20 years before that. Because nowadays, China is now producing its own blockbusters, its own Hollywood-style event films that the Chinese audiences are moving towards instead. I don't know all the statistics, I don't know all the finer details, I'm not up to date on what exactly is being released there. I just know that in general, that is what is happening, that is where things have trended in the last few years. And so that is something that I did not take into account, and it's a big deal because when you look at how much money the last 2 Planet of the Apes movies made in China, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes made $107 million in China, War for the Planet of the the Apes made $112 million in China, but Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes only made just under $29 million in China. And it really just makes you wonder how much money would this movie have made had it come out just a few years ago when Hollywood blockbusters really reigned supreme in the Chinese marketplace. So that's a major factor that I think hindered this movie's overall performance, but also that's something that's hindering every movie's overall performance. When you look at how blockbusters for the most part nowadays, and just movies in general, are all underperforming. A lot of things are underperforming today, especially the movies that are being made for $100 to $200 million. They're just not doing as well as they used to because they don't have that Chinese audience to rely on to make that extra bit of money. The other element of this whole situation that I also didn't take into account when I was making my initial predictions was the current theatrical landscape and how audiences are consuming movies and watching stuff now. The movie industry and the theater industry is not in the same place it was 5, 6, 7 to 10 years ago. It's in a much more lower quality spot when it comes to just the overall health of the industry. Movies are not doing as well in theaters. People are not showing up to theaters anywhere near in the numbers that they were 7 to 10 years ago. Audience attendance is down massively. Even after things kind of started to spark back up after everything shut down during COVID, things still just are not where they were. And so to expect audiences to show up in droves the same way they did for Dawn and to a lesser extent War, I think was something that was just an oversight on my part. It was just something that I wasn't really thinking of. And you just look at how people interact with movies, how people watch movies today. They're not going back to rewatch movies 3 or 4 times in theaters the way they used to. A lot of people just wait to see movies at home now because in a lot of cases the movie is on PVOD within a month of coming out, sometimes as little as 2 to 3 weeks. Of exceptions like with this movie, it's probably not going to be on digital for another probably few weeks or so, so it'll probably overall a 2-month wait. But still, back when Dawn and War were coming out, you had to wait 3, 4, 5, even 6 months before you got to see the movie again digitally. And so that's, again, just an element that I completely didn't think of when making my predictions. So I think when you take these 2 elements into account, and I'm not saying they're the only 2 or the biggest 2, but I do think they are 2 of the biggest elements when wondering why this movie didn't perform quite as well as the previous 3. So I think that's something to take into account when the studio is going to start looking at this movie and whether or not it should get a sequel and whether or not it did well and what it compares to and all that kind of stuff. Overall, I think the movie is probably going to end up making a total gross between $380 to $390 million when all is said and done at the worldwide box office. I think it still could get to $400 million, if not a little over that, but I think at this point it's not very likely. I'd say it's maybe a slightly less than 50% chance it gets to $400 million. I'd go maybe as high as like 35 to 40%. I'm just being real. I wish it would make more, but I'm just being honest based on what I'm seeing here. But still, I think that number is still significantly higher than some of the predictions I saw some people making after just the first weekend. I remember when the movie first came out and it didn't blow the doors off with $250 million worldwide. There were already people saying, oh, it's a flop. Oh, it's not even going to crack 300 million, this and that. And so I think the movie is going to overall do decent, but it's not going to end up being this giant money winner. And so I think the result as a whole is not great, just being truthful, but it's also not terrible. I think in pre-pandemic days, like I mentioned earlier, if this movie had come out in 2019 and this had happened, it's not a good result at all. There's no way to spin it. But in 2024, when movies are underperforming left and right, and this movie is so close to breaking even when a lot of other movies can't even do that, I consider that a win. Not a great win, but it's a modest win in the overall 2024 theatrical climate. And also I think the movie's also going to end up making up for any lost profits, if any, in PVOD and VOD and Blu-ray sales over the course of the next 2 to 3 months. And the other thing is that the movie's release recently renewed the interest and the views of the first 3 movies on streaming. Those first 3 movies have become a lot more popular in the last few months just because of the release of Kingdom and because of their release on streaming. And so I think the 2 have kind of gone hand in hand with helping each other. So I think that is something to take into account as well. As for whether or not I think a sequel is going to happen, I think yes. I think a sequel is still pretty likely, assuming the theatrical run continues at its current pace, and unless it completely falls over dead tomorrow. I think as long as it continues to climb its way towards 400, even if it doesn't quite hit 400, I think yes, a sequel is probably going to happen. But I do think that most likely we will see it get a slightly lower budget, probably in the $130 to $140 million range, if that's possible. And possibly, if they're able to, maybe include at least one big name actor in the next film. The fact that this movie doesn't have almost any known stars and it still was able to do almost $400 million, I think that's kind of a pretty big achievement when you take into account it's been 7 years since the last one. Caesar is no longer involved. Like I said, there's no major stars. It's a new director. It's a new story. It's a completely new part of the timeline, and it was still able to do the numbers that it did. I think you add a very popular, maybe not even popular, but very well-liked, very talented actor or actress in a role in the next film. I think that could boost some sales. I think that could boost some interest. And like I said, bringing the budget down would definitely mediate the risk a little bit more. So I think a sequel is probably likely, but it's going to be a while before we hear about it. I think it will probably be announced, if it's announced, sometime at the end of the summer, if not early in the fall. When you look back at Rise and how long it was before we found out about Dawn, it was a full 3 months after that movie came out that we found out that the movie would be getting a sequel. And it wouldn't be for another year before we even had our director for that sequel. So if you're someone who's panicking already that they haven't announced a sequel yet, be patient. I think it's coming. Again, I could be totally wrong, but I think it's probably coming sometime in the next few months, the official announcement, whether it's, a post on the Planet of the Apes social media account, or if it's something that gets announced during a Disney shareholder meeting or something. I think it's going to be revealed that we're getting another movie. What the details of that movie will be, when it's going to come out, who's going to be involved with it, I don't know, but I do think a sequel is going to come out, just with some adjustments made. I also wonder if maybe the release date might be changed as well. Maybe May wasn't the ideal spot. Maybe sometime in the fall might be better, or maybe earlier in the year, like March or April. I don't really know, but I definitely think some changes are going to have to be adjusted to make sure the sequel can be a success going forward. And I think if they do make those accommodations, the second movie could possibly be bigger than this and could kind of follow in the trajectory of Rise to Dawn, where Dawn made over $200 million more than Rise did. So I don't know if it'll make that much more, but I definitely think the potential is there for a follow-up movie to this to do a significant amount more at the box office, just based on the reception to this one, which overall was very positive. And the one thing I would suggest, and obviously no one's going to listen to me because I'm a nobody on the internet, and also I could completely have no idea how the logistics of this actually works, but in the past, when a movie already had a plan, they already had an outline, they already knew where they wanted to go with a story over multiple films, to reduce costs, they would shoot them back to back. And because they already know where they're going with movie 2 and number 3 in this trilogy, part of me wonders, why don't they just get both scripts out and then shoot both these movies back to back under one big budget? I don't know if that would work. I don't know if the logistics of that actually line up and it would actually save costs overall, but it's an idea that I had. I thought might be worth looking into. That's just how maybe I would approach it. But again, I don't work in the film industry, so I don't know how any of this actually works, but it's just something that I've seen happen in the past for that very reason, and it's paid off a handful of times. So I personally think that might be a way to consider going, but we'll see what happens. But overall, box office, I think the movie is doing well enough. It's a modest win in the current theatrical climate, but there is no denying that it is a bit of an underperformance when looking at the comparison to the first 3 movies and just box office as we know it prior to everything that's gone on in the film industry over the last 4 years. So it's a bit of a mixed bag with how it's doing, and it's not 100% hard yes to whether or not it's going to be able to continue the franchise, but my gut tells me yes. The numbers tell me most likely yes. So I think it's going to end up with a positive result, and I think we're going to end up with an even better movie and an even better box office result for the next movie, assuming it gets made. But that is all I had to say on this matter. I know a few people have been wanting my thoughts on the box office and the potential of a sequel, so I wanted to get my thoughts out there for you all today. But I want to know what you guys think of the overall box office performance. Do you think this hinders or helps a sequel in any way? Do you think it is probably going to happen? Do you think this decreases the chances of it happening? Do you think there's anything they can do to ensure that it happens? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for checking out today's video here on Ape Nation. If you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things apes. I'll catch you in the next one, so until then, goodbye.